Hey friends, welcome to Mark's Roamin, a Vanlife podcast. I'm Mark, a Canadian, and since 2024, I've been exploring a nomadic life, traveling out of my Hyundai Elantra hatchback. In 2026, I made the leap to full-time with a 2019 RAM ProMaster 3500 that I've been converting myself. Come along with me as I drive, hike, and paddleboard across North America. Today's the inaugural episode covering my first month as a full-time nomad and van lifer. I'll share the highlights, some of the challenges, and what I've been learning along the way. I'm currently traveling in Florida and will share a few of the great spots I've found along the road. Today, I'm recording this just outside of Silver Springs in Central Florida. So welcome. Why a podcast? Everyone has done a podcast, and it's 2026. I'm probably about 6 years late to podcasts and van life podcasts. So why am I doing one? Well, I think the main reason is that there is so much that happens within a week. And as a van lifer, you hear kind of this a fair amount online. One of the biggest struggles is a lack of human contact a lot of the time. And so I'm traveling all of these new places, and it's just me as a solo traveler. And I just want to be able to talk about it. I want to be able to share some of those experiences. And so that's part of it. I think the other part too, I've done a couple of YouTube videos for car life, and I'd like to do some of that for van life as well. But video work takes a lot more work to set up all of the shots and then drive by the camera and then go back and pick up the camera and to always be filming things as opposed to experiencing them in the moment. So there is something there that kind of takes away from the experience if I have to film everything. And a podcast is just so much easier for me to be able to get some content out and talk about where I'm going and what I'm experiencing without all of the additional the work and the burden that doing video work kind of adds to that. So a podcast is just a much easier format for me to be able to share some of those highlights. What will I be talking about? As I mentioned, I'll be talking about some of those experiences on the road, but I also want to talk about why I've chosen van life and how I got here, and I want to do an episode on the build process, kind of where that's at, some of the challenges that I've come across in building a van myself as somebody who's never done this before, and as somebody who really doesn't have any carpentry experience either. So I'd like to share a little bit about that, as well as I'd like to do a couple episodes just on some of the basics of van life, like how do I find places to sleep or shower or fill up my water, that kind of stuff. So some of that will be in some future episodes, and hopefully I'll be able to do a couple of interviews too with some other nomads that I meet along the way. So yeah, I'm trying to share all of that with you, and I hope you come along for some of that journey. So for today, I want to talk a little bit about my first month traveling in my van and doing this full time. The longest I've done before this was a 3-week trip out of my hatchback 2 years ago in Northern Ontario. It was a very different experience because I knew that I was returning to my apartment. As opposed to this time, I've cleaned everything out. I've sold a lot of things. I've given away a lot of things. And I have a little bit of stuff in storage. But aside from that, moving into the van was moving into the van, as opposed to just going camping for 3 weeks. And so there's been a lot of just kind of like, if something went wrong with the car, or if something didn't work out on the trip, there was always the safety net, I guess, of returning to the apartment. If anything like drastically went wrong, there was always that safety net of going back to the apartment, going back to work. That's different now. I don't have that safety net. All that I have, or almost all that I own, is in this van with me. If something happens, it's not just a problem with my car, it's a problem with my home. Um, it's a problem with my livelihood. And so there's a lot of additional just kind of like stress, and just you think about things differently that way. However, on the flip side, one of the really nice things is that like my apartment is always with me. Everywhere I go, I have my apartment with me. And so that's nice to know. I don't need to pack everything everywhere I go. If I go on a day trip or go and do some hiking for a day or two, I don't need to carry everything with me in my bag because I've got it here in the van. I don't need to think about, do I need to pull that out of the storage unit or the garage and pack that into my vehicle and find a place to put it, because it's already here with me. So that's been really nice. The first couple of days, I've started this trip on March 1st, which is much later than I'd wanted to do it. I'd wanted to leave maybe about 3 months earlier, but through a number of circumstances I'll talk about in a future episode, that just didn't happen. And so I finally was able to leave on March 1st. 2026 was a really cold and snow-filled winter for Canada, particularly in southern Ontario, where I'm from, just outside of the Toronto area. We had a lot of snow and a lot of days that were very cold. Like a lot of days that were about minus 20 Celsius below zero. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Sorry to my American listeners. But just really, really cold. And so that was really, by the time I was finally able to leave, there was such a sense of relief that even though this trip is going to be much shorter, this winter, there was such a sense of relief of like, I just need to get out. I need to get out. I need to reach a place where it's warm and I can feel the sun on my skin and I don't need to bundle up. And so that was the first couple of days, was pretty much a lot of driving just south, crossing the border and just trying to get as far south as I could, as quickly as I could. I do have a diesel heater inside of the van. But I didn't want to chew through that every single night. Actually, that first day was a bit of a challenge because I started to realize, even though I was driving and the heater was on in the cab, that heat doesn't really transfer back to underneath the bed where the batteries are. And so I was noticing that my battery temperature was actually about 7 degrees, 6 degrees, 5 degrees Celsius. So that's getting it down around like 35 Fahrenheit. And that's not a great temperature for your batteries to be operating at. Mine have like an automatic switch off when it gets too cold. But particularly, it's not so much the taking power out, but it's the concern of like putting power back in with the alternator charging the batteries. I was pretty worried there that maybe I was going to damage the batteries by charging them at such a low temperature. And so I actually had the heater running while the van was driving at times to try and keep that compartment warm. And so my goal the first 2 days was get south as quick as I could. First day I got down to Maryland, kind of that little sliver between Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and then kept traveling through the Appalachians, through West Virginia, Virginia. And it was really neat when I got to North Carolina. I was avoiding the interstates as much as possible, taking some of the secondary highways and scenic routes and local streets. And doing that, there was this tunnel that I went through in the mountains on the very south end of Virginia, entering into North Carolina. And all through West Virginia, that second day, it started with snow in the morning. And then as I kept driving south, it turned into freezing rain, which was worse in terms of road conditions. And then finally it started changing into rain into southern Virginia. And in the evening, I would go through this tunnel. It's the last one sort of coming out of the mountains into North Carolina. And I came out and the sun was setting. And so I was expecting the temperatures to be dropping off again, but actually the opposite was happening. I came out of that tunnel into North Carolina, and suddenly, like, the climate changed. There were flowers, and you could see signs of spring. And I watched the temperature gauge on my dash keep creeping up a couple of degrees. And I can't tell you the sense of relief and just excitement I felt of leaving frigid, freezing rain temperatures and finally getting up into like the teens or 60-degree weather, where it was like, okay, finally I have escaped winter. And I'm finally in a place where maybe I can just wear a t-shirt and not have to wear a big coat over top. And so that was wonderful. I met up with a friend just to kind of pick up something that had been mailed to them for me, and then just kept driving. By the end of that second day, I was just off of the Atlantic coast outside of Charleston. It was a lot of driving, to be honest, those first 2 days. There's a lot of places in the Appalachians I'd love to explore and do some hiking, but it's just not the right season for it yet. It was just too cold for kind of what I was wanting, and I really just wanted to get to a beach and to feel the warmth of the sun on my skin again. So yeah, traveling down through South Carolina the next day or two in Georgia was wonderful. I was able to finally go at a much slower pace and take in a number of different towns as I went along. One of the highlights as I kind of went down the Atlantic coast, getting into Florida, was definitely St. Augustine. I'm a little bummed that this was so early in my trip. I have this tendency when I'm on a trip that the first half, or like getting there, I tend to do really quickly. I have this I don't know, this sense of urgency of like, I gotta get there. And this happens on like every trip I go on. Of like the first half getting there, I do really quickly, just kind of like I don't take my time. I drive a lot, and I get there, and then kind of after that, I get this sense of like, okay, well, now what? I have this time now, and I'm finally here. Now, what do I do? And on the way back, I actually tend to take a lot more time to stop more often, take more days, and visit more places, and discover what is around me. And so this is kind of why I wish St. Augustine was, maybe I wish I'd kind of done the trip in reverse around Florida, but St. Augustine was early on, and it's such an interesting town because it's the oldest Spanish settlement in North America, or in the Americas, or the U.S., continental U.S., and there's this historic section of the city with cobblestone streets. One of them is purely pedestrian, and there's lots of different like little restaurants and shops and cafes and souvenir stores. So it is very touristy. You've got the old Spanish fort there, but it's very different from the box stores of that typical sort of like current picture of an American city that we have in our head of like, the Cracker Barrel on the side of the highway with McDonald's and Wendy's and a Love's and a Pilot Travel Center, right? Like that's the opposite of kind of what this was, because it's so old. And so it was really neat. It reminded me of some of the places in Europe that I've been. It's much smaller. It's very, it's only a couple blocks. But it was very, very unique in that it's unlike any of the other downtowns that I've seen in American towns and cities. They also have a lot of like historic pieces to it. They have people in period costume that are, walking around with pikes and in dresses, and in military garb from like the 1500s, 1600s. 1700s, and so you kind of feel like you're in a historic reenactment a little bit, but you can also walk around with your latte. So that was really neat. I wish I had spent more time there. It's also just a really cool place for it works out well if you're in a van or a school bus or something like that. If you're in an RV, there is this special spot for oversized vehicle parking in St. Augustine, just outside of the historic downtown. And the nice thing about it is that it's free parking. The rest of St. Augustine, it's about like $20-$30 a day to park your car. But they have this oversized vehicle lot that's just for oversized vehicles. My ProMaster is the longest one, so bumper to bumper, it's just under 21 feet. Typical parking spot is about 20 feet long, so I qualify as an oversized vehicle. But the nice thing is that it's just kind of in that sweet spot that sometimes I can still find a parking spot, especially sort of on an end, that I can fit into without a problem. So that's a great spot to stay for free during the day. And in St. Augustine, they allow street side parking after 8 p.m. for free until I think 7 or 8 the next day. And so it was a really easy place to find parking without worrying that I was going to get a knock on the window or a ticket during the day. And so that was really great. There was also this really neat little donut shop. This is a friend of mine recommended this. It's just on the south end of the downtown core as you get close to the big Catholic cathedral and sort of the main boulevard that's right downtown. It's called Peace, Love, and Little Donuts. I don't know, like there's a lot of specialty donut shops out there. This one, they're kind of their take on it is that they're actually very small donuts. And so you would buy maybe a half a dozen in a box and you can kind of pick a bunch of different ones. So instead of just having 1 or 2 large donuts, you can pick a bunch of these smaller ones. And they're all made fresh with the toppings when you order them. I don't know what they put in their dough, but it must be something magical. There's just this wonderful sweetness to them, and I think probably part of it is the volume that they go through. So they're probably deep fried not that long before they go out, and then they're all topped fresh. So if you're ever in St. Augustine, Peace, Love, and Little Donuts was really great. This is another just kind of like weird food thing that I noticed. In Canada, even though we have some of the same like chains and brands, such as Costco, that doesn't necessarily mean that the food items will be the same from country to country. And so, like, I have a Costco membership that I still use typically just for gas, or a couple of like key items. But one of the things I do like to do, this is just, I don't know, this is just kind of weird, but I like to go to Costco and then just wander through, like right before dinner time, do all the samples, and then I get my Costco hot dog. And then I don't buy anything, so I could just leave without it getting in any of the lines. And then I typically go and get my gas after that. I don't know why, I just kind of enjoy walking through. But sometimes they have some stuff that might be good for either like some kind of activity or sport that I want to try or be involved in. Or sometimes they have something that might be useful for like RVs, camping, that kind of stuff seasonally. But I went through and I noticed in the cafeteria that they have these mint chocolate sundaes. Now, we don't have these at Costco in Canada. It's just a plain sundae. And they're smaller too in Canada. But I was like, $2.99, I'll give it a shot. And it was great. They've got like the Oreo cookie crumble stuff on top too. And for just $2.99, I was like, oh man, I gotta try it. So this has sort of become one of my guilty pleasures. Because like they're also big. Like if you've only lived in the US, I don't think you understand how a medium size anything here, the rest of us kind of look at that and say, oh my gosh, like that's a large or an extra large. Like the sizing here is ridiculous. So it's a lot of soft serve ice cream and it's a lot of sugar. And I always kind of feel about halfway through like, oh, I probably only needed half of this, but I don't have room in my freezer for it. So I just go and finish the whole thing. So it has become a bit of a guilty pleasure. I have enjoyed it. The one thing I do miss is like Costco in Canada has these Polish sausages, which is always my preference over the hot dog. I know that's Costco blasphemy. Um, but yeah, I just miss it. It's just different. There's just all of these like little differences when you travel of like, okay, this seems the same, but actually there are some little differences there. Um, yeah, so some of the other highlights of my trip, I went all the way down to Key West, the most southern point of the US. Um, One thing I noticed about the Atlantic coast is that it's very developed. The Gulf Coast is a little bit less so. That's changing. Um, but I was hoping for more like quirky, artsy beach towns, like surf towns along the Atlantic coast. There's not really much of that. There's a few small towns that I did enjoy, but it's a lot. It's a lot of like high wealth development along that coast, especially the closer you get to Palm Beach. But then when you get to the Keys, this was something that surprised me. I thought that the Keys would be extremely heavily developed. I always had this picture of like, I thought like Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort was in the Florida Keys, especially because the first key that you get to is Key Largo. So there's that name. I was like, okay, that must be where it is. So I had in my mind that like the Florida Keys were full of these, you know, $100 million estates, but that's all actually the Palm Beach area, which is north of Miami. And so I really just had a geography lesson driving down the coast here. I did not enjoy Palm Beach. I drove through it, went over the causeway to. There's West Palm Beach, was kind of on the mainland, and then Palm Beach, which is like on this strip of land that's just kind of off of the mainland there, and you can reach it by causeway. And the wealth gap there was just so astounding. I kind of did my drive through, kind of like touring the cribs kind of thing. And I actually started to feel, I think just like upset and sick at just the very clear wealth gap. Because you have all of these estates that are, $100 million estates. That have like multi-tiered hedges along the street front. And then those hedges have multiple gates in them into like this lush garden that you can't really see much in. So they'll have a main entrance, a guest house entrance, and a service entrance. And while I was in Palm Beach, West Palm Beach's downtown was being converted for a yacht show. And so these would be like, for the ultra wealthy. They would come into West Palm Beach and, take a look at these, $100 million yachts for their $100 million estate. And if you go just a couple of blocks from downtown in West Palm Beach, you start to see quite significant poverty. And that gap was just very jarring for me. I've seen wealth gaps in other countries, developing nations, but it didn't seem as stark as Palm Beach, with the absurd luxury that exists there, estate after estate after estate, compared to across the river, only a few blocks away, just the abject poverty that people are living in. And that was gross. There isn't really another word for that. It was gross and jarring, and I didn't enjoy it. And so kind of after that experience, I was, at that point, I was very tired of just how built up the east coast of Florida is. And so the Keys was a nice shift from that. I just spent one night in Miami. I know that probably seems like a tragedy that I didn't really explore Miami, but by the time I got there, I was so tired of the developed areas of Florida that I needed something else. And the Keys was a really nice break from that, especially a number of the state parks that I went to. This is a little bit of a hack that I found if I know I'm going to be in an area for a long time or a longer period of time, is to get like the state or provincial park pass, because it usually gives you access to a whole lot of parks for day use for free, kind of all across the area that you're traveling in. I did this in Ontario for a couple of summers. I did this here for Florida. And often, Florida's a little bit different because there aren't a lot of shower facilities that are for day use. And that's typically because you have beach showers, which are just like a, it's not a closed-in shower. It's not a private shower. It's just like a water tower that is along the sidewalk, and you can wash your feet, or sometimes they've got you can wash your hair out. But you're still wearing your bathing suit. It's not a space where really you can scrub everything down. And so that's something that's kind of missing here. But often in these state parks, you can easily get access to water, and sometimes if you're lucky, or sometimes if you're a little sneaky, access to laundry facilities at a much cheaper price than a typical laundromat. In Ontario, I found this to be very, very helpful because the shower facilities are usually excellent in all the provincial parks. And that might be true in some other states as well. I'm not really sure yet. So I've done that, and that gives me easy access during the day to a place to hang out or visit the beach without having to pay that $4, which is the typical fee for day use for a vehicle at state parks in Florida. Key West was great. Everyone said that it would be impossible to park there and to stay overnight. But I managed to find a spot where I could park for free all day and overnight as well. So didn't pay for parking, and I didn't get any parking tickets and didn't get a knock. So everyone said it couldn't be done. Somehow I managed to find out a way to make it happen. iOverlander was helpful for that, of finding places that maybe I could park or couldn't park or could no longer park. But also I tend to use Google Maps a lot, just sometimes in satellite view, just looking for where are green spaces that maybe I might be able to hang out and park for a bit. Key West was great. It was busy. I was there during spring break, but I was there on a weekend. So Duval Street is kind of the main strip there with all of the bars and restaurants, and so it was nice to be there on a Saturday night and just kind of take in the vibe. I'm not a bar person at all. I feel very weird, especially in a dance club. I went in one spot where they had alcoholic slushies, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds great." Everything's like key lime flavored too in Key West. So I was like, all right, I gotta try one out. So I got my key lime alcoholic slushy. And they have these like Muskoka chairs, or like camp chairs or whatever, wooden chairs, and around these fire pits. And I was just kind of sitting there with my slushy, and I realized like I'm 38. Everyone else in this bar is probably like 18, 19, 20. Like everyone's probably there with a fake ID. And like I'm the ancient fossil sitting there with my slushy. And it just felt so weird. Like I already feel weird in like a club setting. I don't really know what to do with myself, but especially in this place where everyone is like 15 to 20 years younger than me, it was just a strange experience. I still tend to think of myself as being young. But then when I'm actually around college students, I'm like, I'm very clearly out of that phase of my life. And I don't really enjoy being in that space all of that much. But it was nice. It was nice to just kind of like take everything in. I like to kind of get a feel of the vibe of a city or a town, and sometimes wandering around like on a busy Saturday night is a good way to kind of take in, like, what does that feel like here? It's neat. Um, on the way out, actually, there's this really cool spot that I came across. Big Pine Key is sort of one of the middle keys. And on iOverlander, I found that there was this church that had private showers that were available to the public from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. I'm not sure if that was it exactly, but it was around that. And so I decided to check it out, especially like I had at this point had not had a hot shower in, I think, probably, maybe 2.5 weeks. Had a bunch of beach showers, but I hadn't had a real shower in about 2.5 weeks. And so I was really just longing for something like that. I haven't gotten a gym membership, just because I'm not sure if I want to commit to the annual cost of one yet. And so I haven't done that yet. And so seeing this pin for a hot shower seemed very appealing to me. I was there on a Sunday morning, and so I pulled into the parking lot, and there was a young woman who said hello, seemed very friendly, asked if I was new, and I was like, I'm just looking for the public showers, and she gave me directions for it. And it was a little sort of run down, needed a little bit of TLC, but it was just really nice to have a private shower. On my way back out to the van, I ran into this young woman again, and she says, "Did you find them? Oh, and by the way, like, we're doing a lunch, and you're welcome to stay if you'd like to." At first, I was a little bit hesitant because I was like, I don't know these people. I don't know this church. I don't know, like, is that going to feel weird? I don't know who these people are. Um, I don't know if I'm ready. I have the emotional capacity for engaging with a whole community who, that I don't know, and whose, like, beliefs and what they accept and who they accept, I don't know anything about. And so I was hesitant. But then she said, she started listing what there would be for lunch. She included pulled pork. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess I'm staying. It starts in 20 minutes. I guess I'll stick around. How bad can it go? Like, I'll put up with a lot for a nice, like a fresh pulled pork sandwich. But it was actually great. There's a very small community. They're a newer church, and a bunch of them were from Tennessee. They'd moved there recently. They were really enjoying island time, as they called it. Everything's very rush, kind of elsewhere, and the Keys runs on island time. You get to it when you get to it, which is great. So that was actually really nice. It was very laid back. Everyone was super friendly and polite. So if you ever do a trip down to the Keys and you're looking for a shower, I think it's a Methodist church, but if it's still up on iOverlander, you'll find the pin for it. It's on Big Pine Key. And if you're there on a Sunday, maybe you'll get a free meal out of it too. What are some of the interesting and weird things that I've sort of run into? One of the things that I found really interesting is there's quite a wide range of nomads on the road. There's a lot of people that are kind of like me in self-conversions or in, sprinter vans, that kind of thing. But then you also have kind of your typical RVs. So people driving around in these big, 45-foot diesel rigs. Sometimes they've got the big trailer out the back too, or they're pulling their Jeep, or their Sea-Doos out the back, or something like that. And so you have that one extreme of people that have bought their sort of $500,000 setup. In the middle, you've got people like me that are traveling in vans. Some are self-conversions, and some are professional builds. And then on the other end, there's also a number of people who they're in a vehicle because they have no other option. Now most of these are wonderful people. However, I have found there are some people that carry that street mentality that I'm very used to. I work at a shelter in Canada in the summer. Most of our clients, our guests, are wonderful people, but there are a number of people with a very sort of set in street mentality, where there's a lot of addiction, but also a lot of theft, and there can be a fair amount of violence as well. And I think that was something I had kind of forgotten about, because I've sort of been in this space of like following like photographers and travelers and like this sort of like outdoorsy van life crowd. And I've known about like the big RV people that stay in campgrounds. But I'd forgotten that there is also a subset of those who don't have a choice but to live in a vehicle. Most of them are wonderful, friendly, but there is a subset that have a hardened street mentality, with whom theft is a real problem. And I ran into potentially a little bit of this in Key West, where like I was in a fairly empty parking lot, and someone pulled in a sort of a rusty Sprinter van, and kind of boxed my van in. It was hard to sort of get my vehicle out because of the way that he had parked. And it felt so strange because the parking lot was empty. It seemed like very intentional, that he wanted to park in front of me and make it difficult for me to leave. It's kind of like if you're a guy and you're in a bathroom at a urinal, there's a whole row of them and nobody's used, like it's an empty bathroom. Someone comes up and uses the one right next to you. It's that feeling, right? Of like, you're in my space when there's so much other room. This seems like you are intentionally trying to make me feel uncomfortable. And the other part too is I went to throw out some garbage in a garbage can, and I turned around and this guy has his face and his hands pushed up against the glass of my sliding door, looking into my van to see, like, I don't know, maybe what's in there. Is there anything worth stealing in my van? That was the impression that I got. And so, yeah, I came back and this was not a pleasant person to deal with. And I was like, I don't know if I can get out around your van. And he's like, just turn left. All right. So, yeah, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't prepared for just such an uncomfortable experience. I've had a number of people come up. Most of the time it's curiosity about like my van or my build. Sometimes it's just inconvenient and people aren't really thinking about like, I'm living here. This is like peering into a person's living room through their like house window. It's very uncomfortable. Sometimes people just don't get that. But this really was a situation in which I felt that there was some risk or some danger from another person living in a vehicle. And that was just really unpleasant. And I didn't enjoy that. But I don't know, that is what it is. It's just something to be aware of. So kind of along the same lines, kind of another, worst experience for me in my first month was the amount of times that I got woken up by security or the police being told that I couldn't park there overnight. The first night in Florida, I was in a beach town northeast of Jacksonville, and I didn't realize that there was a ordinance for the entire city for no overnight parking in parking lots. And so I got a knock. I got woken up at like 2 a.m. I was parked outside of a community center. I'd waited till all the programming was done. Everyone left. Kind of pulled in late. Turned off all my lights. Closed my sort of divider curtain. Went to bed. Got a knock at 2 a.m. from a police officer. He was very friendly. He's like, yeah, but just so you know that there's a parking ordinance for the entire city. And so there's nowhere else that you can park in this city. You'll have to leave and cross over the bridge to the next town. There's a Walmart there that you can stay for the night. And so that was really unpleasant. I mean, like, it was not an unpleasant interaction with the cop, but anytime you get woken up in the middle of the night by somebody knocking on the vehicle is just a very jarring experience. And so that wasn't great. I've had two other times where I've had somebody tell me I couldn't park there right as I was getting ready to go to bed. So at least it wasn't in the middle of the night. Once was by a security officer, and once was by like a Walmart staff. That was, I don't know, that was frustrating because I'd just been in there and I'd spent like $100 on groceries. And I was like, I'm leaving first thing in the morning. Here's my receipt. I just spent $100 on groceries, and they're like, no, you can't stay here. You'll have to go somewhere else. So that was frustrating. That's, and in part of that I think is from um just certain spots have seen a real increase in not just the volume, but in terms of like the kind of like behavior, like poor behavior from people traveling in vehicles with like garbage and setting up camp and putting their jacks down in the parking lot. And that has kind of made it really difficult for, or less appealing for companies like Walmart or Cracker Barrel to allow travelers to stay overnight. And so that's, I know that all of that's going on, and it does make it harder to, I have to do a little bit of research. And but one of the tricks I've learned is to watch and see, like, are there other like truck campers or vans, or like smaller RVs that are in the parking lot? Because if so, that usually means that I'll be fine for the night. If I'm the only one, first of all, stand out if there is security or cop driving by. But that also typically means that those who do travel or camp or live in RVs in the area already know that that is not an option. And so that's been something I've learned to kind of watch for. Yeah, so what else have I kind of been learning on the road? One of the things that was different for me from my expectation right away was that there isn't enough time in a day to do everything. I'd really expected that I'd have all of this time to do reading or studying or relaxing, but there actually is much less time in the day to do all of that because everything takes longer in a van. Dishes take longer. I've got to heat up my water. I've got one sink to kind of do everything in. I don't have running water in the van right now. Even like cold water, I don't have it running right now. The van's only half built, so I've got to pull out my jug, put it up on the counter. Everything takes longer. I don't have as much space. The van, like for cleaning, like the floor of the van gets dirty and dusty very quickly and pretty much needs a sweep every day. It also means before getting into bed, like my feet are dirty from sandals or from like the floor of the van. And so there's like I go wash my feet before I get into bed every day, and I don't have a tub or a shower to do that. And so that's done with like wet wipes or flushable wipes. So there's, and then there's also like doing research for where am I going to spend the day in a park. If my solar isn't working or if it's too cloudy, where am I going to be able to plug in, especially if I'm not doing a lot of driving? Where is there like a water spigot so that I can refill my water? I don't have a lot of capacity for fresh water. I've got 2.5 gallon jugs, so that's about 20 liters of water. And so I've got to be thinking about like where am I going to find that? And so I spent a lot of time on a couple of different websites looking for spots to park during the day or overnight, seeing if there's parking ordinances that forbid parking, that kind of stuff. So that takes up a lot of time. So there's much less time to actually do like the relaxing pieces that I thought I would be able to do. The one nice thing is, unlike traveling in a car, is I don't need to reconfigure the van from like sleep mode to cooking mode to driving mode. I had to do that in my hatchback. Those were 3 different modes, and I had to rearrange the vehicle each time to do one of those 3 things. I don't need to do that in the van, which is wonderful. I still need to move stuff around from time to time, but I can peel out of a parking lot without having to rearrange things and move seats. I can like cook and prepare a meal without having to move a whole lot around. So that's wonderful. I really enjoy that about having more space of a high roof van. Yeah, finally, to close out the episode, I just want to offer a little bit of advice or just wisdom for somebody who's starting out or thinking about van life. So for today, when I was in Sarasota, I was at this park, and this was I was just doing my morning meditations with my breakfast, and this woman walks up to me and she's like, "Can I talk to you for a moment?" I was like, "Okay." She's like, "Is that your van?" I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "We just bought a van, and can I talk to you for a minute?" All right. I suppose I can be interrupted. Sometimes I'm not ready to be interrupted, but that morning I was. And I was like, all right, okay, yeah, we can chat for a moment. And she's like, "We just bought a van. It's also a ProMaster, and it's totally empty right now. We looked at getting a professional build done, but for the kind of van that I want, and I want everything in it, it was just going to be way too much money, way too much money. So, like, did you do it yourself? How did you get started? And like what do I do?" She asked me those words, like, "What do I do? What do we do?" And I was just kind of like processing through all of this and asking her some questions about like, "What have you done?" And she's like, "It's totally empty. We haven't done anything yet." And we talked a bunch about options, but I didn't really think through or give her an answer to that question of like, what do you do? And here's what I wish I had told her. I wish I had told her you have to start somewhere with what you have. Because I think she, kind of like similarly to me, when I started doing this build, had this idea of the perfect van. And the perfect van, if you're not going to get it done by a professional builder, it's a ton of work. I'm about 300, maybe 350 hours into this build, and it's only about half done. And it's functional right now. I'm able to travel in it. But there's a lot of things that it doesn't have, including like it only has about a quarter of the walls in. It's got about half of the wiring hooked up, maybe 3/4 of the wiring hooked up. All the wiring's in, but like there's a lot of stuff that just systems aren't functional yet. There's no running water, there's no shower in here. So there's a lot of things that just aren't functional yet. But I've been able to get the van to a place where I can travel with it, where it is functional. And sometimes I've got to have not the ideal or the perfect system for doing things like cooking or doing dishes, but it's functional. And I wish I had told her, you just got to start somewhere. It's going to be a lot of work to get your van to the perfect condition. And what you don't actually need is the perfect van. What you need is a functional van, a vehicle that's going to provide the basics for you in between the places that you actually want to go and see and experience. And as you travel and as you have time to kind of go back to your home base, you can keep working on things and upgrade them or redevelop them. And I really wish I had encouraged her. You need to start. You've got to, like, even if it's just like a Coleman stove and a mattress in the back, you've got to start, and you've got to start living in the vehicle to experience it. Because my fear for this woman and her husband is that they will never actually start, that this van will remain empty, and that they'll never actually use it because they have this idea of the perfect van, and they'll never actually get started on it because the starting cost or the starting work or the starting knowledge that they need is going to be so outside of where they currently are that they'll never actually begin. So that would be my encouragement to you. I actually probably didn't need everything. Like, I probably didn't need a van that was this large, and I probably didn't need a vision that was this big. For me, it's kind of worked out because I've had the time and the ability to work on things. But in a different situation, I may not have ever been able to start. So that's my encouragement. If you want to travel, just start somewhere. I started in my car. Just start doing it. You got to figure out a way to start, or you will never start. So yeah, just to kind of close things off. If you are interested, if this has been helpful or encouraging to you, if you've enjoyed listening to this, I'd really appreciate it if you could give this a like or a share, subscribe, comment wherever you've found this. Just give me a review and be like, this is awesome, because that helps other people to find the podcast and to give it a shot. Elsewhere on the internet, most of what I'm posting right now is on Instagram at Mark's Roamin. So like roaming, but with the G dropped off the end. MarksRoamin. So most of that is like stories and a couple of reels and posts that I'm putting up there. You can check that out. Eventually I'll be putting some stuff onto YouTube again. Same handle at Mark's Roamin. And lastly, I do have a website. There's not a whole lot on it right now, marksroamin.com. But one of the things that you can find on there is I do have a travel map that includes some of the places I've been, some of the interesting spots for like food and coffee and craft beer that I've enjoyed, or different places, some of the better spots that I've stayed and slept at. That are sort of already known on iOverlander. Some of that's on there, water, showers, that kind of stuff, as well as just interesting things to see that I've discovered along the way. If you are traveling in one of the places I've been, or if you just like me enjoy just spending hours on Google Maps, you're welcome to check that out. So yeah, finally, I at some point I'll probably be looking at doing either like a Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, setting something like that up. If you are interested in supporting the kind of traveling that I'm doing, if you're like, this is really cool, or the content that I'm creating, if you're interested in supporting that with like $5 a month or something, and would be interested in a Patreon, let me know. Drop me a comment or send me an email. marksroamin@gmail.com. Yeah, if there are people that are interested in supporting this, that would be really helpful for me to know before setting something like that up. So yeah, finally, just to kind of close out, thanks for listening. We'll see kind of what happens with this podcast in terms of the structure and the style over the next couple of episodes. My goal is to do an episode about every 2 weeks. So make sure you're subscribed to this podcast so that you don't miss the next episodes. Finally, I hope that you are able to get out onto the road yourself and enjoy some travel and enjoy some hiking. And if you do, I'll see you out there on the road.